Hey everyone, let's just dive right into this. Welcome to today's explainer. We're going to explore the really extraordinary life of a man who didn't just, talk about freedom. He literally built the foundations of an independent nation. Of course, we're talking about Lala Lajpat Rai, the legendary Lion of Punjab. This guy was a revolutionary, an educator, an economist, and a global advocate. His life is basically a masterclass in how to build lasting institutions and ignite fiery revolutions all at once. To really grasp the sheer gravity of his story, just listen to these defiant words. Every blow on our bodies this afternoon is like a nail driven into the coffin of British imperialism. He roared this, and I mean roared, after being brutally beaten by police during a peaceful protest in 1928. It instantly sets the intensely high stakes of his life and, frankly, foreshadows his ultimate sacrifice. But to see how he even got to that pivotal moment, we've got to go back to the very beginning. So, here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to start with the making of a lion, then move into building the nation. After that, we'll look at the radical triumvirate, his exile and global advocacy, the ultimate sacrifice, and finally, a martyr's enduring legacy. All right, Section 1, the making of a lion, focusing on his early life and education. Tracing his really rapid rise, we start back in 1865 in the small village of Dudaike in Punjab. Now, his upbringing is fascinating because it was this perfect blend of two very different worlds. His father was an Urdu and Persian teacher, and he instilled this deep academic rationalism in him. Meanwhile, his mother was a devoutly religious woman who grounded him in strong moral values and charity. It worked, too. By 1880, he was studying law at Government College in Lahore. He passes his pleader's exam in 1886 and kicks off a super successful law practice in Hisar. But here's the thing. Instead of just sitting back and enjoying his wealth, he diverted the bulk of his earnings straight into philanthropic projects. It set a pattern of self-denial he'd keep up his entire life. It was while he was in Lahore that a crucial intellectual awakening happened. At just 16 years old, think about what you were doing at 16, Lajpat Rai joined the Arya Samaj. This was a reform movement that totally rejected hereditary caste systems and untouchability, pushing instead for equality and a return to Vedic values. For Lajpat Rai, this was the exact ideological framework he needed. It seamlessly connected the need for internal social reform with the much bigger, broader goal of political nationalism. Moving right along to Section 2, building the nation through education and economics. His grassroots legacy really rests on two massive pillars. On the education front, back in 1886, he co-founded the Dayanand Anglo-Vedic, or DAV, school in Lahore. It was completely revolutionary for its time because it actually combined Western scientific education with classical Vedic values, completely countering the colonial curriculum. Then, on the economic side, he realized something absolutely crucial. Political freedom required financial self-reliance, period. So, in 1894, he helped found the Punjab National Bank. This was a massive deal. It was the very first fully indigenous joint stock bank managed entirely by Indians. And the whole thing really comes down to this number right here, 2 lakhs. That was the authorized capital when the Punjab National Bank was founded. And the working capital? Just 20,000 rupees. I mean, imagine launching a national banking revolution with so little. Lajpat Rai was actually the very first person to open an account there. The goal was beautifully simple. Keep Indian money in Indian hands to support native businesses. He was literally laying the groundwork for true independence. Okay, on to Section 3, the radical triumvirate, the famous Lal-Bal-Pal. So by the early 20th century, the Indian National Congress was totally divided. The moderates believed in what Lajpat Rai basically called political mendicancy, begging for gradual constitutional progress through polite petitions. Well, Lajpat Rai vehemently rejected this. He teamed up with Bal Gangadhar Tilak of Bombay and Bipin Chandra Pal of Bengal. Together, they became known as the legendary Lal-Bal-Pal trio. They represented the extremist wing. They didn't want petitions. They advocated for direct action, the boycott of imported goods, and the Swadeshi Movement, which meant relying entirely on indigenous products. But he didn't just use his voice, right? He used his pen as an absolute weapon. He wrote these deeply influential biographies of revolutionaries, like the Italian nationalist Mazzini, and published incredibly fierce articles opposing the 1905 partition of Bengal and the Punjab Colonization Act. His writings, combined with those fiery speeches, made him a massive, undeniable threat to the British authorities. Which brings us to Section 4, Exile and Global Advocacy, and how he built support abroad. When you trace his forced movements across the globe, it really reveals the true extent of the Raj's fear of him. In 1907, terrified of a mass revolt in Punjab, the British used a special regulation to arrest Lajpat Rai and just deport him, without trial, to solitary confinement in Mandalay prison in Burma. The public outcry was huge, so they had to release him 6 months later. Then, in 1914, he travels to the UK to present India's case for self-rule. But when World War I breaks out, the British literally bar him from returning to India. This led to a forced exile in the United States. He settled in New York in 1917, founding the Indian Home Rule League of America. And he lived in absolute poverty there. I'm talking cooking his own meals, living in a tiny room, just so that every single penny he raised could go toward lobbying the U.S. Senate and building international support. What's really truly remarkable about all this is that despite being thousands of miles away in forced political exile, his mind, his soul, remained entirely with the suffering people of his homeland. When he was finally allowed to return to India in 1920, he didn't miss a beat. He immediately presided over a special session of the Congress and founded the Servants of the People Society to promote education and social upliftment. Now we reach Section 5, the ultimate sacrifice, the final spark. So what exactly ignited the final spark of the lion's life? Well, it was an event in late 1928 that brought all the simmering tensions in India to a sudden, violent boiling point. The Simon Commission had arrived in India to discuss constitutional reforms. The catch? It didn't include a single Indian delegate. The insult was just profound. So on October 30, 1928, Lajpat Rai leads this massive, totally nonviolent protest march against the commission in Lahore. In response, Police Superintendent James Scott orders a brutal lathi or baton charge directly into the peaceful crowd and personally assaults Lajpat Rai. The 63-year-old leader took severe, brutal blows to his chest. Actually, it was right after this beating that he delivered his famous nail-in-the-coffin speech. Tragically, though, he never recovered from the trauma. He died just a few weeks later on November 17. The nation was outraged. His death deeply radicalized a whole new generation, prompting young revolutionaries like Bhagat Singh and the Hindustan Socialist Republican Association to vow explosive, violent revenge against the British authorities. Finally, Section 6, a martyr's enduring legacy. His legacy is just remarkably multifaceted. He authored absolutely essential texts that expose the economic drain of British rule, books like Unhappy India and England's Debt to India. He founded institutions that not only outlived him but are thriving today, the immense DAV Educational Network, the Punjab National Bank, and the Gulab Devi Tuberculosis Hospital, which he named after his mother. But perhaps most importantly, his courage and his ultimate martyrdom galvanized an entire generation of youth to relentlessly fight for Swaraj, or complete self-rule. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this question to chew on. Was his greatest legacy the enduring economic and educational institutions he so meticulously built? Or was it the fiery revolution that his martyrdom, those nails driven into the coffin of imperialism, ultimately inspired? It's a fascinating balance of creation and resistance, isn't it? Thank you so much for joining me to explore the life of the Lion of Punjab. Let this remarkable story inspire you to think about exactly what kind of legacy you want to build.